We have reached the 7 o'clock hour. Good evening. Tonight, we're having the Dartmouth Conservation Commission meeting as posted for April 9, 2024. It is now 7 p.m. We're conducting this meeting remotely because Governor Healy on March 29, 2023 signed legislation further extending the hybrid remote meeting options to municipalities, and her extension lasts until March 31, 2025. This meeting is open to the public. There's raise your hand feature, and if everything else fails, wave your hand will do. We'll recognize you. If you're not speaking, we'd ask that you mute so that we don't get background noises. And again, don't forget, if you've got your camera on, this is being televised and recorded, so nothing you don't want everyone to see. The way we do the meeting is we start off with administrative, then we do field trip reports, and then we go into public hearings. The public hearings are where we invite interested parties in the audience to speak on a particular matter, and they can speak in favor or against. I'd ask, though, that we limit our comments to the issues involving wetlands protection, either state or local. That being said, I'd like to first introduce and welcome on board our newest Conservation Commissioner, Liz DiPaolo. She's newly minted. She just got sworn in today and was appointed this past Monday by the Select Board. So welcome, Liz.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So our first order of business is to approve the minutes of March 12, 2024.
So moved.
So moved.
We have a second. We have a seconded motion. We'll do a roll call vote. Kyle.
Yes.
Richard.
Yes.
Liz.
Yes.
Nat.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. The second administrative item is the approval of the field trip reports of March 26, 2024. A motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded motion. Roll call vote. Kyle.
Yes.
Richard.
Yes.
Liz.
Yes.
Nat.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Our third and final administrative item is to receive the minutes of the March 26, 2024 meeting. May I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion. Roll call vote. Kyle.
Yes.
Richard.
Yes.
Liz.
Yes.
Nat.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. We're moving now to our field trip reports. Our first is a request for determination of applicability, RDA 24-8. It's from Matthew Kate to repair a septic system in both the riverfront area and the 100-foot buffer zone to an inland bank to Destruction Brook. It's on land described as map 28, lot 88. It's at 76 Slades Corner Road. Mark, staff's comments.
Yeah, this is a small residential lot sandwiched between Slades Corner Road and Destruction Brook. The inland bank was flagged along Destruction Brook. Destruction Brook is a perennial stream. The work proposed is a septic repair. It falls in part within the buffer zone and in total within the riverfront zone. It's in a lawn area. It's right near the street and as far away from the stream as possible. So staff is recommending a -2 with our standard erosion control device condition.
Thank you, Mark. Any commissioner have any questions? Not seeing or hearing any? I'll entertain a motion to issue a -2 determination with the standard erosion control conditions.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion. Roll call vote. Kyle.
Yes.
Richard.
Yes.
Liz.
Yes.
Nat.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a comment? I see Mr. Katie is here. Matt, a negative is actually good for you. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I appreciate it.
Positive, you would have to do more work with us. Negative, we are moving it along. So I just wanted to make that clear for you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you very
One
much.
time in your life, you want to get something that's negative.
That's right. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Our second field trip report is a request for determination of applicability, RDA 24-7. It's from Benjamin Reese for the construction of a new septic system to replace the existing cesspool. It's within the 100-foot buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. It's on land described as map 65, lot 11-3. It's otherwise known as 1031 Old Fall River Road. Mark, I'll be interested in staff's comments and recommendations on this request.
Yeah, this is a required septic repair. It's in buffer zone. And it's on a developed portion of a lot. It's a larger parcel that is being subdivided. But this is the original or the oldest structure on the lot. It was on the original large lot. Staff is recommending a -3 in this case with our standard erosion control device condition.
Thank you, Mark. Does any commissioner have a question of staff? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to issue a -3 determination with the standard erosion control conditions.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion. We'll have a roll call vote. Kyle,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. That motion passes unanimously. And as Mark said before, we have another request for determination. Negatives means you've got our blessing. Go forth and do what you want to do there in terms of your septic repairs. So number 3 is a request for determination of applicability, RDA 24-9 from Elizabeth and Duval Silva to request an after-the-fact approval for an existing large shed, raised garden bed, greenhouse, chicken coop, and wire fence enclosure and debris removal, both the bordering vegetated wetlands, the BVW, and the 100-foot buffer zone to the BVW, and to an off-site inland bank on land described as map 77, lot 1-2, is otherwise known as 870 Fawn's Corner Road. Mark, what is staff's recommendation on this request?
Well, this was a little complicated. We were asked to go out under the Wetland A1 program to flag wetlands on site. And there was a former line of record that has been well established for the the Enclave subdivision, although that line has expired. It's pretty much accurate in the field, and we reflagged that. But what we did notice is that much of the rear portion of the parcel falls within the buffer zone. And in checking our records, there was no filings for the construction of a shed, a fairly large shed, although looking through the windows, it is a raw building. There's no plumbing, there's no insulation. It is a shed for storage. There was also a greenhouse on the parcel, all within buffer zone. There was raised gardens and chicken coops and piles of debris strewn about. And this was all really on the edge of the buffer zone, right before you went off the lawn, down the slope and into the wetland. Staff spent a lot of time trying to figure out what we wanted to do here. The site is very stable. There are no impacts to the wetlands, recalling what the wetlands looked like pre-Enclave subdivision. So we decided this home is up for sale. So we decided to allow them to file for an RDA. And the staff is proposing or recommending a -3. And this is subject to 3 conditions, which typically I wouldn't do, but this is kind of a unique situation. It's a -3 with 3 conditions that read: 1, building structures in the lawn area may remain. 2, all debris and broken down garden and chicken coops shall be removed immediately. And 3, a split rail fence shall be constructed along the down gradient edge of the lawn with a fixed signage stating wetland area, no dumping or disturbance by order of the Dartmouth Conservation Commission, and this fencing and signage shall be maintained in perpetuity.
Thank you, Mark. Does any commissioner have any question? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for the issuance of a -3 determination with the 3 conditions outlined by Mr. Garrett, which can be incorporated into the minutes in the record and into the determination. I have a motion.
So
for that.
moved.
We have a
Second.
motion, seconded motion. Roll call vote. Kyle,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. That motion passes unanimously. We have now our final field trip report, which is a request for certificate of compliance, DEP file 15-2630. That's RCC 24-9. It's from Louis Silva for the after-the-fact notice of intent in response to violation for the restoration of the impacted 100-foot buffer zone 2 and a portion of the bordering vegetated wetland on land described as map 88 lot 2-10. That's otherwise known as 27 Karen Lane. Mark, staff's comments on this request for certificate of compliance.
Yes, just a little background to give everybody back up to speed. We were originally asked several years ago to do a wetland site assessment for the repair, the necessary repair of an old cesspool septic system in the front yard. Upon coming to the site, I forget if it was Gary or Adam, discovered that a lot of clearing had taken place in the backyard on a slope going from the lawn down to a wetland area. So it was certainly buffer zone, and it was quite extensive. We issued an enforcement action, and Mr. Silva, I believe it's, yeah, Mr. Silva engaged Zenith Engineering and Stephen Schmiel. The restoration has been planted. The restoration is successful. Mr. Schmiel provided us with a monitoring report late last November. We have been out to the site a few times. The vegetation is well entrenched and successful. The debris, the cut trees have been removed. The stumps that we allowed to remain for sprouting have sprouted. So having said all that, staff is prepared at this point, since they've met the monitoring requirements and the performance standards of the BVW, that the commission issue a complete certificate of compliance in that this violation and enforcement action has been successfully completed and can be closed.
Thank you, Mark. Does any commissioner have any question? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to issue a complete certificate of compliance on this matter, which is DEP file 15-2630.
So moved. Second.
Second.
We have a second motion to do a roll call vote. Kyle,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. That motion passes unanimously. That concludes our field trip reports. We're now moving on to our public hearings. And we have 2. The first one is a continued public hearing, DEP file 15-2720. That's NOI 24-6 on the notice of intent from Edward Borges, care of Russell Waldron of Applied Ecological Sciences, to construct a gravel driveway that crosses a bordering vegetated wetland and inland bank and a single-family home within the 100-foot buffer zone to the bordering vegetated wetland. The applicable regulations are 310 CMR 10.02, 10.54, and 10.55. Also implicated is Section 2 of the Town of Dartmouth Wetlands Bylaws. It's on land described as map 65, lot 48. It's on Bergeron Lane. I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading.
So moved.
Second.
With a second motion, roll call vote. Kyle,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. That motion passes unanimously. We've received a request by email to continue this particular matter until our next public hearing, and that would be on Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024 at 7 p.m. I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
Mr. Chairman, before you entertain a motion, I believe Russell Waldron has a raised hand and would like to comment.
I don't see him, but okay, Mr. Waldron. Yes, I do see him now.
Yeah, everybody can hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I just wanted to give you an update. Well, this has been a bit of a stretch getting the engineering plans and designs. When I submitted the filing, I thought it was going to be, with discussions with our engineer, and he figured, 4 weeks, to get the plans ready. And I told him, I said, well, I'm going to go ahead and file this with just the plan that we have, and just so I can get Ed in the process, get him, because he's been waiting around quite a while. This has now stretched on. I spoke with the engineer last week. He is on it. He was out of commission for a while. He's, working his way back. He says he's about 70% back. So based on how he sounded and that comment, I'm assuming he got knocked down with whatever respiratory thing is going around up here. And, but he assured me he's on it. I told him what the next submittal deadline was, and he said he's going to do his absolute best to get it to me by then. And so that's kind of where, excuse me, where he left it with me. And so yet again, yes, I apologize, but we are requesting another continuance.
Well, I appreciate the full disclosure, Mr. Waldron. And unfortunately, people do get sick, and sometimes the best of plans get tossed aside with that. So, personally, I just want to know, is that going to be enough time? I know he says he'll do his very best, but if you think you might need a little more time, why not move it to the following meeting?
I don't have a problem with that. Nope, at all.
Mark, do we have a date for that meeting? First,
I don't have it in front of me. I believe it's the 14th of May.
yeah, we have to actually have a date though. Let me see here.
It's
I think-
May 14th.
Okay, so it'll be a May 14th. I think that might be better, Mr. Waldron. That gives your engineer a little bit more time in case he has a bit of a relapse or something, because the last thing you want to do is come back and ask for another continuance.
Right, yeah. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'll let him know. Or actually, I might not let him know. We'll let him stick to the submittal guideline and see how he makes out.
That might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, all right. Good enough.
I'll entertain a motion to continue this matter, which is DEP file number 15-2720, until our first meeting in May, which is May 14, 2024, at 7 p.m.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, we have a roll call vote. Kyle,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. That motion passes unanimously. Mr. Waldron, you'll be on again on May 14th. If you get the stuff in earlier, beautiful. Submit it to Mark, but you won't be heard until May 14th.
Oh, that's fine. That's all fine. And I appreciate that. Thank you much.
You're very welcome. You have a good evening.
You also.
So we're now moving on to our second and final public hearing. It's a public.
Mr. Chairman, might I cite a typo? Our second public hearing is a continued public hearing. That was not carried over into the agenda.
Oh, okay. So this should be, number 2 should be a continued public hearing on DEP file 15-2726. That's NOI 24-11. It's an after the fact notice of intent from Joseph Baptista for the unauthorized removal of wood debris and grading within the 100-foot buffer zone to an inland bank, and the applicable regulations are 310 CMR 10.02, 10.54, and Section 2 of the Town of Dartmouth Wetland Bylaws. This is one land described as map 33, lot 39-2. It's on Chase Road. I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion. Call vote. Kyle,
Yes.
Richard,
Yep. Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. That motion passes unanimously. Is there someone here this evening on behalf of the applicant?
There is. Good evening, Mr. Kehoe.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing well, Mr. Chairman.
Floor is yours, my friend.
Okay. Well, let me just start off by saying good evening to yourself and all the members of the board, and most especially Ms. DiPaolo for coming on board for the first time. And I want to thank you very much and congratulate you. Also as a resident of town, it's always refreshing to see young people come on and wanting to look out for the best interests of what we have and what we want to preserve. But moving on to tonight's matter, I represent Mr. Joe Baptista, and the property that's in question here is on Chase Road. And this property has had a long history as being operated as a sawmill. It's been operated as a sawmill for at least 2 prior owners to my client's acquisition. Mr. Baptista recently acquired the property on November 27th of 2023. And the property had previously been utilized as a site in which a very large scale, if you will, at least for the size of the property at large, it was I would say an intense use of that property. And if you were to see and you look at, and I want to call up one of the photos, I'll call up a photo that I have, and with the chair's permission, if I could share the screen.
Absolutely.
I think this will be beneficial. Let's see. I'm going to show you a 2020 photo here. So the area in question here, I've got a mouse. I think, can you see when I move the mouse down towards the lower area here of the
Nothing
photo?
is, nothing
You
is,
don't have a photo, Michael.
yeah, nothing's
Nothing's-
come on my screen.
Oh, I guess I have to hit share screen. Is that what I need to do?
Yes.
That's good. I think that's a good starting point, but
That's
believe
probably
me,
a good starting point. Where is it here? Share screen. There it is. Then can't see this, it's too small. I have to go to this. Oh, here it is right here. Hit this. Share. There it is. How's that?
it's, well, we got the screen saying you're trying to share. Yep, now we got the aerial. I can see
Okay.
it.
And when I move the mouse here, can you see it on the screen?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Okay, so the area in question is the resource area here is this pond-like area, which is I guess has been determined to be an ISLF area here. The property actually, the boundary of the property runs along where I just showed you here, and the operation, as you can see, there are logs here. There's some sawed wood that's here. There's rough sawed wood. There's also some pressure treated wood in this area here. There's some strewn about here. My client in purchasing this property, his intent is to build a single-family home for he and his young family. He's married, he's got 2 young children, he's not a developer, he's not a builder, this is not a spec situation, this is one in which he's gonna build a home for himself. And he, when he purchased this, he shortly after, sometime in December, he engaged the services of a wetland consultant to walk the property with him, to give him an informal determination as to whether or not there was any impact here. And it was brought to his attention that this may be a resource area here and he should stay away from it at about 100 feet, which he had full intentions of doing, and which I would argue that he tried to do, and he did do, other than a couple of things that unfortunately give rise to why we're here today. Now, the buffer area that's being alleged, and I will show that in the plan as we move forward. The buffer area extends around here, and the affected area that we have is somewhere in here where there was wood. My client describes it as there were some logs in the area, there was some rough sawed lumber, there was also pressure treated wood in this particular area. There's also a couple of pieces of some metal equipment that was abandoned there. This stuff was in the midst of some invasive plantings, and he himself, with an excavator, actually crawled up from outside the buffer area, didn't run the tracks into this buffer area, but he reached in and he plucked out these encroachments that were there. And it's what I've described would be the encroachments. And when he plucked this out, and I would suggest that he try to do it surgically, it was an excavator with the teeth on a bucket and an actual thumb, took that, plucked it out and removed it from the premise in an attempt to remedy what was an already pre-existing encroachment. Now, as a result of that, there were some teeth marks that were left in the soil. There were also some invasive plants that were removed from the premises. Those invasive plants have been described to me by the wetlands consultant as bittersweet and multifloral rose. That's what was impacted, along with some of the etching that occurred as a result of him plucking these items. I would suggest to you that this was a pre-existing disturbance that, quite frankly, any disturbance that he may have caused was less intrusive than what was already existing. If you look at this, if you look at this photo, you can see that there's a lot going on here. I'm going to try to share another photo. I think it's a more recent one, of 2023. Let me see if I can. Let's see, 2023. Can you see that one?
Still got the first one.
Got the first one. How about now?
Still the first one.
I'm sorry, I am not that savvy with computers, especially when it comes to doing this, but let me see what I've got here.
It may be that you're sharing one window rather than the entire screen. Maybe
Okay,
try
I'm
unsharing and try again.
going to try it one more time. 2023, where are you? 23 aerial photo. How about now?
Unfortunately, I still have the first picture.
All right, it says resume share. Is it better now?
Same one, hasn't changed.
All right, well, I may call upon, I also have Mr. Kevin Silva, who's the engineer who's been assisting my client with this. If he's able to share the screen and assist me with that, I think it might help things. And I think he might still be available, or he might still be part of our hearing here. But if he's not, basically what I'm trying to show in these photos is that there was a significant amount of disturbance with this parcel. There are aerial photos that show disturbance on this parcel as early as 1938. And from 1938, there's a significant amount of harvesting of gravel and sand from this site, which impacts not only the topography of the site, but also is what created this pond, if you will, which is now considered a resource area under our bylaws. I would suggest to you that this disturbance was in existence well prior to the implementation of our bylaws, wetland control bylaws here in town. And this particular resource area was created, is a man-made creation, if you will. And you'll see that there's a tremendous amount of gravel. If you look at the 1960 photos, which I'm going to see if Mr. Silva would come back on and assist us in presenting those photos. But in the meanwhile, I want to continue on. So the portion that's in question here, let me see if I can find this plan. Let me try it one more time. It says I'm paused. Let me get out of paused. A new share. See if I can find that plan. Minimize here. Me.
I can try to call it up, Mike, if
Yes, could you call it up for me, Kevin, please? And I
somebody's gonna
apologize,
let me
members of the
share.
board, I apologize.
No
Yes.
problem.
My
And-
husband
and-
says the host disabled my screen sharing. So if somebody could let me in.
DC TV, if you can let Kevin in to share screen, that'd be great.
Should be able to share now.
Okay, thank you.
Is that showing up?
No, I don't have anything yet.
All right, while he's trying to do that, I can just give them a slight little narrative as to what the pictures would be depicting. There's probably a photo there from 1938 that would show the existing conditions at that point in time. You can see that there is a significant amount of disturbance back in 1938. And then from another photo in the 50s also shows additional disturbance in the area. And then in the 60s, you'll see that there's a significant amount of gravel that was further taken from the premises in the early 60s. So, quite frankly, those photos would only support the fact that this was a situation in which there was a significant amount of disturbance prior to the implementation of regulation on this particular use. The use that's occurred here as a sawmill dates as far back as probably the late 80s. I think we're getting something now.
Yeah, that looks like it's.
Is that the same? Which is that the 2023? Yes, that's the 2023 photo.
Looks more modern.
Yes. As you can see, in as early as 2023, there's actually a boat on site. There is some pieces of equipment that were of the type that were used in a sawmill. I think you also see that there's some areas in which there's a significant amount of sawdust on that property as well. And the area that's impacted is the area just above the pond there. I think there still may be some items that are there, and that's well within the buffer area. If you go just slightly north of that area, I think this is the area that's in question, in which my client attempted to mitigate the encroachments that existed and remove them. And in addition, unfortunately, as a collateral consequence, there was also some invasive plantings that were disturbed. Now, I think that what needs to be noted here is we're dealing with the outer fringes. We're not dealing from 0 to 50 feet from the resource area, not even 50 to 75 feet. We're dealing, based on a plan that's been submitted, we're dealing 81 feet from the resource area. My client is proposing it, and Kevin, if you'd be so kind, and for the record, it's Kevin Silva of S&K Engineering who's actually assisting me with this. If you'd be so kind, if you could put the plan on.
Okay, give me a second here.
Mike, if I could add, if it's the April 1st plan, The commission has that. I sent that to them in a packet, so they do have that plan.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
So,
we get all of the plans and submittals that
wonderful.
were in
So
on time. So,
if I
yeah,
could direct your attention to the plan that's submitted.
okay.
This was prepared by Mr. Kevin Silva, who's on the line with us here. The plan proposes to mitigate the disturbed buffer area, excuse me, the disturbed buffer zone area with some plantings within the, and you'll see that there's a smaller scale up towards the middle of the plan in which it delineates what the plantings are. So the total area that was impacted by this is 1,458 square feet. That's the total area. And if you don't have a plan, I think Mr. Silva has put this on and it's being shared. Hopefully everyone else can see it if they don't have a plan. So in the legend here that sort of blows up and provides us a better visibility as to what's being proposed. So the total area impacted, as I stated, was 1458. The portion in which there's going to be plantings constitutes in total 654 square feet. My client proposes to plant 3 American holly trees, 4 high bush blueberries, 3 sweet pepper bushes, and 3 blackberry trees or bushes in that area. The area that he seeks some relief from is roughly 804 square feet, which he proposes to have utilized as a lawn area. And that makes up the area in that legend, if you will. It's actually not shaded. It's the clear area that has from the 100-foot buffer mark line to the area in which the plantings. There's also to be proposed is a silt fence to serve as a barrier during any period of construction. I'm sure to be removed at some point with approval. My client, if you could see on that plan, he's building a modest home. He seeks to have a rear yard, and he's somewhat limited as to what he can place here, given some of the topographical makeup. He did consider pushing the house further back and potentially have a yard out front. But given the high water mark here, there's a 6 foot. He has to be 6 foot above in order to install a septic system. The proposed septic system will be on the front, closer to Chase Road, as is delineated on the plan. He also proposes to build a barn towards the rear of the home and the rear of the property. From the barn back, that's where we have a significant change in topography there. And he was trying to preserve an area for his young children who are very much enrolled in youth sports, both baseball, soccer, lacrosse. So they're full season athletes, and that would allow him to, with having the grass area in the outer perimeter of the buffer area, would allow him to be able to utilize that space for that purpose. He's also immediately behind the home, considering putting a swimming pool there, so the yard area would be behind the swimming pool. It's our position, and we understand that the agent has voiced to us that he has concerns with what has been proposed, in that it may not be significant enough. And we understand he obviously has a role to play here, and he's doing his job in coming forth and asserting his position on this. However, we're trying to see if we could have the board understand and persuade the board, if you will, that a couple things happen here. And my client really wants me to reiterate this. This was not done with any malice. This was not done without knowledge of where the buffer zone was. This was a situation in which it was an attempt to remedy an existing encroachment in which he tried to go in, pluck it out, and unfortunately, in doing so, he did disturb some vegetation, and the vegetation was an invasive planting. And I think even the agent, the conservation agent, would agree that it was just invasive plantings. There weren't any trees that were cut down. There wasn't any tearing up of low-level plantings on this area. It was basically, I don't think, to be quite honest, I don't think there's anything that could have been done other than once you remove the encroachment that was there, you're left with a barren spot, and it looks like that there's a disturbance. So he had all good intentions when he was trying to do this, but unfortunately, It did impact, it did trigger bylaws in which there are regulations affecting this. So he's here. Unfortunately, it's a situation where it's a notice of intent after the fact filing. He's already been punished. In order to be here today, he had to pay a fine of $1,000. I would suggest that certainly that was a very strong, more than just a slap on the hand. He's here. He understands that he's going to have to remedy whatever disturbance was created. But quite frankly, it was done with good intentions. And we're here to listen to the board's concerns. If they feel that there's something other that needs to be done, then we're here to try to work with the board. And if anyone has any questions, I have my client here. He's here in my office with me, even though it's not visible. He's here to answer any questions that I might not be able to answer. And if there are any technical questions that the board would have, we have Mr. Kevin Silva, who could probably answer those probably slightly better than I could.
Thank you, Attorney Maderos. Mark, I guess at this point, I think the applicant's presentation has been completed. I'd like to know staff's comments relative to this request.
Okay, I'll try to keep them as short as I possibly can. I will not reiterate the historical account of this site. I think Attorney Maderos did a fairly accurate job of suggesting that. And I understand how one would look and say, well, he removed encroachment, as Attorney Maderos calls it, to improve the site. Yeah, he did. However, he was doing it in an area that the Conservation Commission has jurisdiction both under the state law and moreover under the local bylaw. The work would probably have been approvable if they had asked permission. You know, the applicant is going to say that he didn't know, whatever. A lot of the activity that Attorney Maderos speaks of, photos from 1938 and, you know, leading up to wetland jurisdictional controls. We've all seen that. We have no question about any of that. And the removal of the timber debris was probably a very good thing. However, there is process here. And what you were being asked, well, first of all, the pictures that you saw, I shared with you pictures that were shared by their wetland consultant, which I think show a little bit more about what happened. Attorney Maderos says vegetation was disturbed. I say vegetation was clear cut. And I also know that, and I don't want to misspeak on this, but Attorney Maderos talked about how Mr. Batista, and I believe he tried at some level to control the extent of work towards the wetland. But in fact, a comment was made to me that, well, the equipment was here and the contractor said we should do it, and it was done. That to me speaks volumes about, and I don't know if it was intentional or an unintentional disregard for the law. And so there clearly is a violation here, more so with regard to the bylaw than the act, but certainly a violation nonetheless. We tried to work with the applicant. We could have slapped an enforcement order on this project 6 weeks ago, and I made a determination not to do so, as is my practice with most of these. Kevin, I don't need those photos to keep coming up. Okay, could we just go back to the screen, please? If you have a follow-up presentation, you're more than welcome to show that. But I'd like to see everybody I'm speaking to, if that's possible. I lost my train of thought here. We, instead of hitting the applicant with an enforcement order right out, we said, okay, file an after the fact notice of intent. Let's see if we can get this action approved with the proviso that I need the buffer zone restored. Okay, when I go out on the site, I'm walking on sticks and dirt. I've been in this business for 40 years. That's clear cutting. That's not removal of debris and damaging vegetation. Regardless of whether the vegetation was bittersweet, whether it was multiflora rose, or whether it was Spartina alterniflora or winterberry, it was clear cut. I thought I made myself very clear in what I wanted for restoration. I got a plan that you saw and I shared with you, dated April 1st, which shows me minimal restoration of the buffer zone because the applicant wants a lawn area. The applicant has plenty of lawn area. The applicant is also building a barn. The applicant is talking about building an in-ground pool, as was just described, on a piece of property which the applicant maintains is limited. So with all of that limitation, the Conservation Commission is being asked to disregard their charge under the bylaw and the act and allow 55% of the buffers area to be converted to lawn. And I'm not sure that 55% is really accurate when you look at the square footages, because when you look at the plan, it's one row of plants and some seating. But I'll take the numbers as they are. 55% of that buffer zone is to be converted to lawn with no real justification. And 45% of it is being restored for buffer zone. In my opinion, given this circumstance, that is inadequate. Having said that, it's the commission's choice here as to what they want to do. This is a violation. We've continued once because plans weren't ready. I don't know how many more times the commission wants to continue this out to get something that is approvable. Attorney Medeiros and I had a very nice conversation, very respectful today, and we both agreed that we're not in the same position. And ultimately, it's the commission's decision as to what they want to do. Having said that, the only way I think that we can exercise what needs to be done if the commission thinks that my recommendation is appropriate to restore the entire buffer zone is to issue an enforcement order now. We've been at this for 6 weeks and we're still basically at square one. And an enforcement order allows us to set deliverable dates and performance responses to the applicant so that we get the work done that needs to be done. So that is my recommendation, to issue an enforcement order to the applicant to provide 1,458 square feet of restoration on site. And what wasn't mentioned was that some of the work that took place was actually done on a budding parcel, town of Dartmouth land, owned by the water, in control of the water department. They were unaware of anything. So again, I go back to the premise of, are we to allow the general public to determine what's appropriate, what laws are appropriate for what action and what isn't? I think not. I think we have laws and regulations that we have to enforce. And that's what I'm proposing that we do enforce. We can't have every action taking place that appears to be noble and worthy go ahead without checking with people who may have authority over those parcels of land. So again, my recommendation is to issue an enforcement order with mandated dates of an approvable plan for full restoration by April 18th of this year, which we can then approve on the 23rd, and the plan and all restoration work to be done by June 17th of 2024. And in addition to the restoration, I'd like to see a rail fence placed at the edge of the buffer zone with signage indicating that This is a wetland buffer zone, no dumping disturbance by order of the Dartmouth Conservation Commission. That is my recommendation to the commission, and, you know, I'm available for questions or, certainly will enforce whatever determination you make.
Thank you, Mark. Does any commissioner have a question? Of either the applicant or Mark or the staff?
If I may,
Yes, you may.
in an opportunity to sort of rebut what was raised by the commissioner. And I'm having difficulty because I heard this very same term this afternoon when we did have a very nice conversation. The term clear cutting. I think and I respectfully disagree, but I think that's a gross mischaracterization as to what transpired here. When I hear the word clear cutting, I'm thinking of trees being cut down. That's not what happened here. And I invite any member of the board, if you want to go inspect this site yourself, feel free to do so. But that is clearly not what happened here. I've walked this site myself. I'm familiar with this site. I've been familiar with this site for over 40 years. I recall going there as a kid. I knew what was there throughout many, many years, especially the last few decades. But to say that there was clear cutting, that characterization is just completely misplaced when you look at what happened in this buffer area. Quite frankly, the only thing that was disturbed was some brush. It was an invasive plantings that was described by an expert in this area, Mr. Capone, who was hired by my client, who has characterized it as bittersweet and multifloral rose. These are terms that were provided to me with specificity in knowing what was there, having gone there before the site was disturbed. And again, I think we need to not lose sight of the fact that this is a pre-existing situation. This was the fact that there's even a resource area is as a result of man-made doing, number one. Number two, there has been a pre-existing use that was been in existence prior to the implementation of the rules that are trying to be enforced upon my client now, at this moment. And to say that we need an enforcement order, it's not as if my client has been trying to hide away from any of this. He's been working with the town since day one. He's the one that called them onto the site. He's here today. He engaged the services of an engineer to put this together. And he's here to come before this board at any point in time in order to address this situation. So to have rigidity placed upon him for an enforcement order just seems to be a situation where it's just not warranted, quite frankly. And I say that respectfully. I do understand that Mr. Garrett has a job to do. I respect him. I don't know him all that well, but I've had good conversation with him just this afternoon. I respect his opinion and his position, but I just think that it's misplaced on this particular site with what's transpired here. And when I state to the board that my client's imposition here was quite frankly to remove, and I invite you, if you want to look at those photos again, to see the level of operation that was going on this site. And fortunately, most of this site is free of even a buffer area. It's only a small portion of the site is subject to the buffer area. But unfortunately, within this buffer area was pressure treated wood. There were even, my client says, some light bulbs that were there. There are some photos that even show that there's some stuff still there that he didn't touch that would have required him to actually go in there. And it's not easy to remove some of this stuff. There's even a tarp. There's a blue tarp. There's some photos with a blue tarp in which it's in this area here. And he's just left that alone. There's also some encroachments on the town property, none of which he has created. And to tell you that it was done by his predecessor, he can't tell you that. It might have been done by the person before that individual that owned the property, because it's been a sawmill for quite some time. We're here presenting the board with a plan that we feel is reasonable under the circumstances. And we'd ask the board to consider what's been presented in light of the fact that it's going to be used as a single family home. It's going to not any longer. And if you, I do have some photos. I'd like to show you what the property looks like now. And there's a photo from the rear of the property before the topographical change, sort of where the proposed barn would be, looking towards Chase Road. Kevin, are you able to put that photo up, please?
I'm trying to get it. There's a lot of photos here.
I don't want your vacation pictures.
Yeah. Don't worry, I don't like vacation.
Mr. Chairman, if I could respond while we're waiting for the photo to come up, not to, drag this out too long. Attorney Medeiros questions my use of the term clear cutting. And he suggests that clear cutting means that you're cutting trees, all the trees. Clear cutting means you're cutting everything, not just trees. Okay, you are clearing down to the dirt. If you look at the two pictures I forwarded to you of the buffer area provided to me by Mr. Capone, you will see that we're down to dirt. And that to me is clear cutting based on 40 years of being in this profession. Okay.
Well, if I may.
Secondly, whoever put the debris out there back to 1938, there were no regulations controlling it. I have not accused or suggest to accuse Mr. Batista of putting that debris out there. I have said that his actions and his intentions to remove it are noble, but he did not follow the procedures and he encumbered upon land that this Conservation Commission has jurisdiction over and has protections, especially under our bylaw, for a various number of wetland values. And to turn more than 50% over it to lawn, which I think is a convenience, that's my opinion, but that's a convenience because there's plenty of lawn on that site without that area, is not an appropriate taking of regulated area. And his work, and I'm only worried about his work, I can't do much about what the previous owner or owners did, but his work occurred after 1972, occurred after 1983. The key dates in the upgrade, in the establishment and the upgrading of wetland law and wetland bylaw. In our bylaw was created last in 2020. 2000. And this work that Mr. Batista did occurred after 2000. Because he was fixing an old problem doesn't mean he doesn't have to comply with current law. And that's why I believe that the lawn area is not necessary to his development and enjoyment of his property and is an impact to the wetland values that our bylaw protects, regardless of whether you think it's a good wetland or a bad wetland, and a good buffer zone or a bad buffer zone. This, in fact, will enhance the buffer zone, and actually, if it's done right, would be a very attractive landscaping piece to this property.
Thank you. You had something you wanted to say, Attorney Medeiros?
I do, Mr. Chair, and the members of the board, if you just for a moment, if you could picture this. We're in the buffer area. We've got several logs. We got several stacks of wood, measuring an area, let's say 20 by 40, or maybe even 20 by 30, just all spread out on top of the earth. It's been sitting there for years. You go and you pluck it out with an excavator. What are you left with? There's not going to be any vegetation underneath logs. There isn't going to be any vegetation underneath a stack of wood. And then it's described as clear cutting. When you remove logs that have been sitting on the earth for years and you're left with dirt, now it's clear cutting on the part of my client.
Mr. Medeiros, where you were circling your aerial photo had debris in it and it had a lot of scrubby vegetation. Okay, now we're splitting hairs here.
No, we're not.
I'm not
With all due
talking
respect,
about the
we're not.
dirt under the debris. I'm talking about the vegetation that was removed.
There wasn't any vegetation that was removed other than invasive
Oh, yeah,
plantings. And that was,
that's where you and I disagree. I'm
This
sorry.
stuff was so intertwined with logs, with wood, with pieces of metal, with pieces of equipment. When you tear it out, you can't surgically remove the stuff. It's all intertwined. It's grown within itself.
Therefore, it was removed
So we
without
should.
authorization or permission.
But if we follow
My
your rationale,
point.
with all due respect, Mr. Garrett, if we follow your rationale, it would have been better off just to leave it there. We'd be dealing with a pile of logs, a pile of debris, glass, metal, vehicles, maybe boats, all on this property, and that's not an encroachment. That would be fine. My
I
client didn't touch it.
definitely disagree with you because I said if before the action was taken, the applicant came to us, it probably would have been approvable. This is a process and procedural matter dealing with the law.
So maybe we put the cart before the horse, but we're here for the same matter. We're here for the same matter. There's no reason to punish the man.
When you violate the law, you violate the law. I mean,
It was The law was already violated before my client even bought the property. It was already violated. The fact that the mere existence of the logs being there and this wood being there was already in violation of the law.
Mr. Chairman, I'm done.
Okay. Kevin, did you get the picture that Mr. Maderos wanted to show us?
Unfortunately, I can't get it because it's on a different format and I'm having trouble downloading it. I don't know if Mike can get it, but
I'll try it one
you
more
can
time.
clearly see from the photo. I don't know. Can Joe share it? Joe, can you share it?
How to do that, Kevin? I can put a picture off my phone in front of the camera.
Let me see.
That would be almost impossible for us to tell what we're looking at that point.
Ah,
The resolution would be so poor and the image so small.
Is this viewable?
I don't know. I don't see anything.
Just don't know how to make the change. Darn it. So
and it's unfortunate because the picture does show how it's cleaned now, and it does do a lot of justice as it sits today.
Yeah, I'll be very candid with you. Listening to the presentation, it sounds like the difference of opinion really is in the restoration. Okay. It seems like there's no disputing the fact from anybody's standpoint that there was activities taking place on that property over decades, predating Wetlands Protection Act, predating town bylaws, which would never be allowable today under either of those sets of laws. And it's also, I think, undisputed, Mr. Garrett didn't argue this, that the applicant thought he was doing something that was good. Okay, so we're not suggesting that, I don't think the Conservation Commission or the agent is suggesting that the applicant tried to pull a fast one. Not at all. But
is it
here
on
we-
there?
what?
Sorry.
That-
I'm
I
sorry.
see
I'm sorry.
something, but it's nothing. It's just somebody's, well, it shouldn't say it's nothing. It's somebody's computer home stuff, some of which we probably really don't want to see. But there is a Chase Road Baptista desktop. Maybe it's in there. Anyway, so from my standpoint, the real dispute is, what do you do to restore? And quite frankly, if it was an application that came before us to clear that out, I think, as Mr. Garrett said, it stood a pretty good chance of getting approved. Now, the question is, would it have been approved to say, we want to take 55% of the area and make it a lawn? That might not have been approved, okay? But certainly to clear it out and restore it would have been. So I think that's where the hangup is, I think, between what we're hearing from staff and we're hearing from the applicant. And I could be wrong on that, but that's what I'm getting when I'm listening to the presentation for both of you. I don't think it's an issue of whether Mr. Baptista did something terribly wrong and tried to do something to get away with it. I don't think that at all. I understand why he did it, but we are left with a situation where there has to be some restoration. So, I'm looking at this sort of in a neutral standpoint. And even I looked at that restoration plan and it seemed a little sparse to me. Okay. And I'm not an expert on restoration, but it seemed a tad sparse. Is there anything that can be done to satisfy what Mr. Garrett is saying, which is a complete restoration? What, perhaps some of this stuff can be spread out a little bit more, say blueberry, maybe some, I don't know, I'm sure there weren't any trees cut down. I don't know if you need any trees, but wetland species, wetland seed mix, that sort of thing. I mean, Mark is better at restoration than I am, but it just seems to me that that might be the solution to the problem.
If I may, Chairman, this is not a wetland, it's a buffer zone. So I don't know we want to put wetland vegetation in.
Well,
in the buffer
you're
zone.
right, you're right about that, but okay, let's say you put blueberry bushes in or something. I mean, that would be approvable. I'm
Right.
just saying, right now, I'm looking at the amount of area that appears to have been disturbed. And I won't say clear cut, I'll say disturbed. And apparently there's nothing going to sprout up out of the ground on its own, except probably invasives. Okay. So if we had the same type of planting scheme, but spread it out over the disturbed area, that might be more satisfactory. Certainly it seems that way to me, because this is a lot different, I think, than if you went and tried to sneak a fast one by, which I don't think you did. But on the other hand, Mark's right. There is a process. We apply this process to everybody who comes before us, almost without exception. There has to be some pretty unique circumstance. In this circumstance, I'm willing to look at the restoration of the area. I think that's important, but we're looking at a 45% of the area restored with, I think, not a real beefy plan. But that's me. I mean, I'll let the rest of the commissioners talk on that if they want to ask questions. Mark has already given his say on it. I'm not sure, I want to go to an enforcement just yet. And I understand why you're recommending that, Mark, because clearly that puts in motion the timetable.
Did you ask a question, Mike?
Oh, I didn't. I said I understand why you.
Okay.
I'm not
There's
sure
some
that.
background and I didn't hear you.
Yeah, I said I don't know if I would agree to go to that step at this point, because, I think unless the applicant says absolutely not, we're not going to do any more restoration than what we proposed, then we're probably left with little choice. But, there might be something that can be produced in time for our next meeting that's more, satisfactory. Excuse me. If not to Mr. Garrett, certainly to the rest of the commissioners, and I'm only speaking for me. Excuse me. Does any other commissioner want to say something and contradict me? Well,
Mr. Chair, to a quick question, Mark. I don't know if the applicant would want to do this, but would it be an option to provide additional replication in another area of the property if he wanted to maintain this lawn area that he wants to put in this particular location?
Well, I mean, to me, it's a moot point because whatever the restoration is, whatever the square footage is, it's going to be eliminating what he wants to have his lawn. So I don't know that relocate. As a matter of fact, this location is probably the best. It's the farthest away from his living space and what I consider the use area of his yard. The lawns are contiguous. If he puts a pool in, the barn, whatever, I mean, this is about as far away from his life activities as you possibly could be on this lot. I mean, if I were the applicant, I would say, well, this is where I would want to replicate, because that would give me more usable contiguous area. So that's.
Good. Thank you. Obviously, I haven't
My
been to the
comment
property.
as
so-
an approvable restoration plan. I can't get into the design of what they're gonna do. I'm asking for an approvable restoration plan.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting, Mark, that you design it for him.
Yeah, no, I know.
I'm just suggesting that perhaps the applicant will put paper to pencil and come up with a better restoration plan, because I certainly would want to use the enforcement order as an absolute last resort. And, you know, the applicant has, as Mr. Madero, Attorney Madero said, he's engaged his services, engaged engineers, paid his fine. I think he is attempting to comply. I'm willing to give.
He is a good guy. I like Joe. I mean, I have a problem with what they presented.
No, I understand. That's why I cut right to it. I said, I don't think we have anything in dispute other than what the restoration plan is. All right, and I think that's where we've kind of run into the bump in the road.
If I may,
Yes,
when
please.
you're in a restoration usually is restoring something that you remove that is of value or of some importance. This is debris that was intertwined with invasive species as Chris described it. And now you're putting in expensive plants in the middle of the invasive species that are gonna be surrounding the rest of the area. It just, I would love for us to show you the photo of the way this lot looks now. And what it's gonna potentially be is a lawn, whether the barn and all that, that's in the, outside the buffer zone. He wants the flat yard behind his house. He can't put it too much stuff anywhere else because he has, because it's an aquifer zone, he has to do a roof infiltration system, which takes up quite a big area in the backyard. He has a septic system and a water line in the front yard, not to mention the mound of the septic system in the front yard, which is gonna impact the use of that because it's sloping, so there'll be no room for his kids to play some type of sport, whether it be soccer, lacrosse, whatever it is. So I just,
I understand that. I think Attorney Madero's made that point. I think, though, that although I certainly can empathize, the question is whether or not this commission feels that enough has been done on the restoration to consider it satisfactory, okay? And by the way, in the buffer zone, you would need more than an after the fact notice of intent to pluck the stuff out and make the restoration. You'd need to have a notice of intent to install the lawn area, because you're talking about putting lawn area, which in and of itself is a disturbance of the buffer zone, in the buffer zone instead of what was there before. So I'm certainly mindful of the fact we'd all like to have, you know, areas that we can have for our family to enjoy. I mean, just not that long ago, we had to have people come back to us with a different plan for their pool and patio. And they had to reduce the size of the pool significantly because there was no justification for that sized encroachment into the buffer zone. And you can have an adequately sized pool without doing so. So, I mean, we are mindful of what people want, but sometimes we'd love to be able to give people what they want, but sometimes it just isn't justifiable. And that's why I'm thinking if there's some sort of a revised plan that you or Mr. Capone is willing to present to Mark, I'm willing to, and this commission, I'm certainly willing to give you the opportunity to do it. Otherwise, we can vote on it today, and that's certainly your right as well. We have a recommendation from staff to not issue an order of condition, but rather to issue, you know, an enforcement order. And Mark's given us the date that he would put in the enforcement order. I'm trying to offer an opportunity to avoid that, but I can't make anybody do it. I just can tell you that I'd feel comfortable if we came up with a plan that would be approvable. And as Mark said, we're not here to design it, but And who knows, your vote might be a positive vote tonight. I can only speak for me. I'm not, I'm not trying to prejudge how the rest of the commissioners will vote. So it's your call on that too, but I think, Attorney Maderos has been in enough meetings and court proceedings to know, read the temperature of the room quickly. And I'm just trying to offer the opportunity to avoid it becoming something which I'm sure nobody wants, which is the enforcement order.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
just to further explore the suggestion of Mr. Ross, which I don't think is a bad one, is that if you look out towards, if you can look at the map on the southwest portion of the lot outside the buffer area, if there were some replication in that area, that would not be as impactful to my client and his use of the yard, and yet would still create balance to ensure compliance with the regulations.
That could be a good suggestion, Attorney Maderos. I think, I'd be certainly willing to, this is me personally speaking, I'd be willing to entertain, a continuance for you to present that type of a restoration. And if it's approvable, that might be a solution where your client can get something that they're looking for, and we as a conservation commission feel we protected our resource areas. And again, I'm not unmindful of the fact that people want to have certain lifestyle in their homes and areas, and we're not here to make it more miserable for them. We're trying, but we do have a role to play, and that sounds like it might be a solution we can all live with.
Mr. Chairman, I can't live with it because you can't restore a buffer zone outside of jurisdiction. That's impossible. What are you gonna do? You're gonna just plant plants in a corner and, plant a garden and say, well, that's the buffer zone? I mean, we have to look at what we're trying to do here. And this is a violation of a regulated area under the act and the bylaw. We have done this numerous times in the past few months and years where people have gone in and impacted buffer zones. We just had a garage barn not too long ago where we agreed to have a buffer zone to use a lawn area of buffer zone. We required them and they agreed to do a restoration of some degraded buffer zone in the rear of their property. Okay, so it was a buffer zone to buffer zone thing. You just can't plot this anywhere on the lot. Very little of this lot is under our jurisdiction. They could pave 70%, 80% of this lot. We'd have nothing to say about it. The one corner that they cut and he did a lot of stuff along with other areas, okay, is in our jurisdiction. So any restoration would have to be within our jurisdiction, not anywhere on the lot. We're not creating a wetland here.
That's all. You raise a good point. I will retract what I said because you're right. It is buffer zone.
Yeah, Mark, and I didn't mean to overstep my bound. I was just looking for a compromise between the applicant and the Concom, that's all.
Yep, I understand.
Mr. Chair, surely we have reasonable people who reasonably disagree on reasonable grounds. I know exactly where Mark is coming from. The procedure by which what happened was incorrect and should have never happened. He should have come before us. However, we can't change the past. What Mark just said about putting the buffer zone in an area that's not a buffer zone, you just can't do it. It's impossible. But what I'm suggesting before we issue an enforcement order, surely reasonable people can sit down and reasonably work out a problem to a reasonable resolution. And I hope with what has been said by Mark tonight, perfectly online, and what Mr. Maderos has stated, surely something can be worked out. If it can't, then we got to do what we have to do. I just don't want to see now, if I may say, that the doors are closed to talking about this, to getting a resolution which will be acceptable to Mark as agent and acceptable to Mr. Maderos as an attorney for his client. I just don't want to see that door closed at this particular time. If, however, nothing can result, then we got to do what we got to do. And I concur with what Mr. Garrett has said on this here, absolutely. But I just don't think the door should be closed right now. That's my opinion.
No,
And that's
it's-
surely not negating anything that Mark has said, because I agree with it. It's how we got there. You know, the ends doesn't justify the means, and that's exactly what this is. But surely something can be worked out that both will be acceptable to his, Mr. Maderos' client and acceptable to the rules and regulations of the Conservation Commission.
Well, I'm hopeful that that's the case.
All right, so Mr. Chair, if you would
Yes.
grant us the opportunity to continue the matter, when is your next date? April 20?
April
Third.
23rd is our
Right.
next,
April 23rd. So if we could continue the matter to April 23rd, and maybe in the interim, we could put together a preliminary so that we could submit it to Mr. Garrett, get a sense of well, we know what he's asking for. We're hoping that there's still some more wiggle room, if you will, of compromise to see if we could work something out that would still be workable for my client in his ability to utilize this portion of the property. So
I mean, I'm willing to give you that opportunity, and I will tell you, you know, from listening to it, I don't know how much wiggle room there will be, but I will tell you that, you know, we'll certainly give you a chance. Mark, what are the submittal dates? Because in order for that to be discussed at the meeting, we can't have it the day before. It's got to be what?
April 18th by 3 PM. That would be the Thursday before the meeting on the Tuesday.
Yeah, and so, you know, otherwise we can't put it on the agenda. It'll have to, you know, so we'll do that. I think that's I shouldn't say that, but I will vote to see whether.
Let me offer this to Mr. Maderos and his client. April 18th is the deadline. My suggestion to you would be to have something to me ahead of time. And I would also offer, if you want to sit down, if your consultant, if Joe wants to sit down at the table, we can have a plan rolled out and we can scribble on it, and maybe that would help come to some sort of solution. I'm willing to do that.
great.
You want
That
me to
works.
bring the pizza?
We didn't invite you, Richard.
Yeah, really, Richard. when did we invite you?
I didn't say I'd be eating. I said you want me to bring the pizza. That's what I
Oh,
said.
you're now going to be the delivery man.
No, because this is the beginning to a hopeful, reasonable resolution acceptable to everyone.
All right, you bring the pizza, I'll bring the beer.
You got it, pal.
Go. There you go. Okay, I'm not going to foreclose anyone in the audience who wants to be heard, but we're going to be voting on whether to continue this matter until April 23rd. Now, I'll say that because of that, we do not close the public hearing. So if you don't speak tonight, you'll have an opportunity to speak at the continued public hearing. With that being said, I want to know if there's anybody in the audience who wants to be heard on this matter tonight. I don't see anybody. Okay, like I said a moment ago, we're not closing the public hearing. So commissioners, we have a request for a continuance of this matter until Tuesday, April 23rd, or at 7 PM. Do I have a motion to that effect?
Motion.
We have a motion
Second.
made on the motion? We have a
So
second.
moved, so
Second.
moved.
A second on the motion. Roll call vote. Kyle,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes,
Liz,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. That motion passes unanimously. So we're continuing now until April 23rd. There'll be no additional notices going out to any abutter or anyone in the audience, so mark your calendars, okay? And if you want to be uber cautious, you can call the Conservation Commission ahead of time to find out if there's been any requests for anything else, okay? So if that plan hasn't been, you know, submitted, as Mark said, by the Thursday before at 3 PM, then we can't discuss it at the next meeting. So thank you for agreeing to do that. I hope we can have a resolution to this which works in everyone's better.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
And I'll
Thank
give
you.
you a call tomorrow, Mr. Garrett, so we can set up a time probably next week. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Thank you, sir.
All righty. You have a good evening, everyone.
You too.
We're gonna go on to our items for discussion. The first, we don't have any bills. I don't see that, so that's good. We don't have to worry about the Concom vacancy interview update. Liz is here, so
Well, no,
What
we,
is going on?
I have
I
asked,
don't understand
the
It's hard to
communications
miss-
person to post, another, another solicitation because, we may be having some vacancies. There's terms that are up and things of that nature. So, it would be good to have at least some names in the queue as opposed to chasing, as we normally do.
I think that's a good suggestion. I misinterpreted that. I thought you were gonna give an update on the
Well,
interview.
I was, but I don't have to because the update is on the screen.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was
I
thinking.
will say, Liz, if you wanna come into the office, and I can show you some stuff and, point you in the right direction. Maybe give you some information to read. I can do that.
Absolutely. I'll be in touch with you about that.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
Mark, I think I don't know about everyone else, but I think when I came on board, I got a copy, loose leaf binder of the town wetlands protection bylaws that was helpful. And I don't remember now if I made it myself. I might have. I pulled out the CMRs myself for the state. But as you'll notice, Liz, when I was reading some of these public hearings, I made reference to this regulations, like this last hearing, I said it was 310 CMR 10.02, 10.54. If you have the CMRs or just the ones regarding wetlands protection, you can actually go read those regulations and see what it is we're discussing. Same thing like section 2 of the town bylaws. But if you
Well,
have
it's my intention to provide Liz copies of anything she needs and the bylaws, the act, the regulations. Some of it's available online, but some of it's pretty cumbersome too. So we can produce it.
Yeah, the CMRs can be a pain in the rear end because, well, they're not as bad now because you can use the search. But before that, they were just not really easy to use when they were in hard format. They just put them in these massive binders that would take half of your room up. Anyway, that's a good starting point, okay? And that way, when you get the agenda, you could look and see what the regulations are that are going to be discussed. It really clues you into what's going on, because I know it must have felt a little weird listening to this and saying, I don't even know what the applicable regulations are. That'll clue you in. And you'll find yourself getting right into it pretty quickly.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. We have a requested discussion by Clay Guerrera regarding OOC compliance requirements, FN 15-2713, NOI 2353, and affordability. So, Mark, you want to give us
Well, Mr. Garrett's here, and I'm going to let him do most of the talking here. Mr. Garrett came in, I believe it was last week or late the previous week, indicating that there was some cost issues in meeting the requirements, the date requirements for completion in the order of conditions. And I said, it is an enforcement action. We've been at this for over a year. It's not my decision. I said, it's best if you come before the commission and plead your case to them and they'll make the determination. I mean, this is, in my opinion, like all of this enforcement. It goes on and on and on, and at some point, you gotta close it down, but I'll leave it to your determination, listening to Mr. Guerra on this. We'll go from there.
Fair enough. Mr. Garrett, you now have the floor, sir.
Hey, we can't hear you.
Muted. Yeah, I
I
can't
think
hear
you're
you.
muted.
Try it now.
Still can't hear you.
Okay.
Looks like he is unmuted, so it seems to be a microphone problem. Somewhere on
Now
his
he's
end.
muted. There, now he's unmuted. No,
If you go to where you unmute, there should be an upwards arrow. If you click that, you can choose your microphone. You may be able to choose a different microphone if you're using something different than an internal. But if that doesn't work, I'm not too sure.
no. Cannot hear you, Clay.
You could try calling in with a number if you'd like. I can post it in the chat if you want to call. Just give me a moment to pull it up.
Should we proceed to the next agenda item or we?
Yeah, why don't we
Wait for
do
the-
that while we're waiting? We have a,
Yeah, it's just an FYI, last week I received a rather lengthy, environmental site assessment report on, the Potter Street sites, which included the boring logs and the first round of sampling, the pre-construction sampling. I'm not prepared to report on it. It's a very encompassing report. I'm probably about 2/3 of the way through it. A lot of data sheets to review, a lot of stuff to review, so I will have something for you, an executive summary, if you will, in the next week or two. You know, we can discuss it then. I will also say that they filed their first building permit to construct one of the solar fields on one of the parcels today. It came in late, so we just saw it. We don't know what it is, you know, how we haven't even commented on it yet, but
okay. So is Randy gonna be up to speed on this? Cause he's, you know, there was a little bit of a history on this when Joe was here, so is he aware of that history?
I don't know. I certainly will provide him with a fairly comprehensive comment. I mean, we issued orders of conditions, and so that's that. We have some requirements. I find it a little interesting that they applied for only one of the parcels. I haven't figured out why yet.
Yeah, that is unusual, but hey.
I mean, they submitted a plan with just the one parcel, but then they submitted their whole plan set, which is our plan of record, to the 3 orders of conditions that were issued, so I haven't quite figured that one out.
Yeah, well. Okay, keep us abreast of it. I mean.
I will. Clay, are you hooked in?
Still.
No, still can't hear you.
I assume you're on a desktop. If you go down to chat and click on that, I did post the number you can call in and try to call in on your phone, see if that works.
Mark, are there any enforcement issues that we should know about while we're waiting?
None right at the moment. I'll give you an update. The Maury site looks pretty darn good. They have benefited by the heavy rains, and the heavy rains seem to be knocking down the Phragmites because Buttonwood Brook is really flowing. The other thing you folks should know is if you're in and around the Buttonwood Brook area, you're gonna see a lot of orange and blue flagging, Buzzards Bay Coalition. Their Buttonwood Brook team is going out and doing work. Oh, I also should also mention that, the Mare site has been sold. The landscaping site where the valuations were has been sold to the Buzzards Bay Coalition.
Wow. Well, now we know they fix everything correctly.
So, well, you know, what was done was eventually done, it appears to be closely, pretty appropriately. But I know that Buzzards Bay Coalition has additional plans for further restoration slash enhancement. They're really targeting the area between, the Dodge Reservation and, Elm Street. They've got a dam removal proposal and some wetland enhancement through that corridor. So they are working pretty hard and trying to get stuff done, and they're doing some acquisitions, but no real enforcement as of yet. I'm happy to see we closed out 27 Karen tonight, so that's another one off the books. So we're
Good.
just we're getting a lot. We do have a few, but a lot of them are, kind of similar to what we discussed earlier. Oh, we didn't know. So we're trying to give them a chance to get themselves out of trouble before we have to get too serious with them.
Good. So,
I can
Clay-
summarize what Clay told me. I mean, if he can come on, and round it out. Basically, what he told me was that he can't afford to complete the work as, Clay, are you there? Yeah, I can't hear you still. Clay, I'm gonna summarize our discussion last week, and we'll, hopefully we hit all the points, and we'll go from there. What Clay said to me was that he's extended whatever resources he has available to him to pay for Prime Engineering and Lolito Environmental Services to do the design work and everything else regarding the restoration of wetland damages on his parcel and the abutting DNRT parcel. And I know Linda Vanderveer is here listening in from DNRT. What he's proposing to us is that he do the work on DNRT this year and postpone doing the work on his property until next year. And this is not an opinion, this is just fact. Most of the wetland work and restoration work has to be done on his land. There is some that has to be done on DNRT, but the greater percentage is on his property. The other thing which I informed him of again when he came in was that he has yet to get an approval from the zoning agent and or the board of the select board as it relates to chapter 375, whether that trailer can stay on that lot in a permanent or semi-permanent manner. To my knowledge, aside from some initial discussions that Rich Rayom had with the former zoning agent, it appeared that they had to go to the select board. To my knowledge, they haven't done that yet. They may have done it since Clay and I spoke, but I don't know. So again, this is something that is in limbo, and I'm sympathetic to the costs of these things, but people need to understand that when they violate the law, it can get costly to fix the problem. And Clay and I had a conversation, prior to his purchasing the property, and I indicated that whatever was done out there was probably going to be a costly proposition, even if it was legal. So I don't know where the commission wants to go with this. He certainly would have to amend the order of conditions to change dates, which is going to cost him some money. We get into a bad habit, and we have been in a bad habit of letting enforcement just go and go and go. And what that means is it never gets done, and then it's sort of forgotten and put on the back burner. As you know, I have been fairly aggressive with closing out enforcement, whether it was enforcement that was started before my time or enforcement that I've initiated. I like to see closure, and I like to get the job done and move on. I think that is one of the best things that you can do for environmental quality, regardless of how small a particular incident is. Clay's got an affordability problem. I don't know if that's something that the commission wants to consider. You know, moving forward, I will take your guidance on this. My position is when we issue an enforcement order and we give dates, the date should be complied with. But, you know, I understand that sometimes the problem is too big and, may in fact be a cost situation. But anyway, Clay, I can't see, we can't read that. So that's basically where we are.
Yeah, I got a question for you, Mark. You know, forget about for a moment what percentage of the restoration is on whose property. Is the restoration realistically capable of being phased?
Well, I guess I would say, without having really sat and studied it in that context, I'm sure portions of it can be done, but there are some areas that, I'd say yes, it's possible, but I couldn't give you a description of how or what would be phased when. I mean, I think Clay has offered a simple phasing program, which makes sense. Make DNRT whole as quickly as possible and then worry about his situation. DNRT's situation is, I think, a little bit simpler than his. So it's, to me, it's gonna cost him a lot less on the DNRT portion of the restoration than it is on his own. So. I don't know. I don't know.
I guess you've answered my question. You said, yes, it's possible, but now you're leaving us with the dilemma of, well, what do we do as a commission? Because then we're living with this for another year.
Right, I mean, I did that, and that's a I mean, to me, we set dates we felt were pretty reasonable. And we've been at this for a long time. I mean, we have continued and, we have been lenient on how long this has taken place. That trailer was out there all last summer. It got out there before the summer. It's gone through the winter. We're halfway through the spring. We're getting to the summer again. We're closing in on a year plus on this. And, I don't remember when the original complaint came in, but, again, it's how tolerant and how flexible does the commission want to be? These are impacts. These were totally avoidable impacts. Again, permits should have been cut, like the discussion we had before. And this is just to get a vehicle into a site. This is nothing to do with taking encroachment debris off a site.
Yeah, I certainly completely understand that it becomes financially difficult to comply with restoration, but I don't know. I'm kind of personally, I'm kind of torn because I understand that, and yet on the other hand, I also understand the fact that deferral, kicking the can down the road, doesn't make it any easier to pay for it, and we're still living with it. And we have the other problem, which is if there's some issue with the legality of having the trailer there and that doesn't get resolved, then it has to be removed. And we've got a whole nother restoration issue to contend with.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. I mean, this is, I mean, you know, as harsh as this sounds, we are regulators, you know, and regulators are not supposed to be empathetic or sympathetic or whatever you want to call it. Regulators have to administer the law as it is. And, you know, we set, and I think we set fairly, very fair deadlines on this. Obviously, Mr. Guerra didn't have the means to, or has expended the means that he had to do this work in his consultants. That's between him and his consultants. That's not our problem necessarily. But as usual, in many of these cases, money's expended up front. There's a lot of paperwork that's churned around, and at the end of the day, the on-the-ground solution is the thing that ends up suffering.
May I be heard for a second, Mr. Chair? I happen to agree with Mark. You know, we are human beings. If the guy is in financial straits, that's one thing, but let's walk across the street. Are we going to open up Pandora's box with other people who are in violation? And they come back and say, I'm sorry, I don't have the money? What are we doing here? Is this the downstream consequences of what we're talking about could be, in my opinion, catastrophic. People are going to come in, I don't have the money, and take the enforcement order, and you know what you can do with it. I can't pay. What are we doing here? Are we opening up Pandora's box?
Well, I think you're not wrong. You're not wrong in making that statement. You know, if we have a rule and we want to be fair, we want to be impartial in our application of the enforcement to the rule, then we can't be culling out exceptions. It's difficult to say that because I'm mindful of budgets. I mean, I live under a budget, and I know that if I got hit with an unexpected expense of probably the magnitude that you're looking at, it would be difficult, okay? But I'm also mindful of the fact that if there's rules that need to be complied with and they're not, then unfortunately, I have no one to blame but myself for that expense. So I don't really want to start making exceptions because then we're going to have hearings like they do in court, Richard, you know, about whether or not you qualify for a court-appointed attorney. You know, I want to go through financial discussions with people. And,
You know,
it just seems to me we have an enforcement order. Either it's honored or it's not, and we know what happens when it's not. We end up in court. And that way we can, you know, in the future, people look at it and say, well, they mean what they say, you know, we better do what they say because it's not going to get any better. And it doesn't. I mean, once you go to court, you know how fast that mounts up.
Right, yeah, Mr. Chair, I mean, that's where I was gonna go with this. I think that we just continue doing what we're doing here. And in the end, we let the third district judge make this call, whether the man can pay the money or not, and let him determine the hardship. And we maintain our level of consistency.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, a good suggestion, a very good suggestion. I mean, otherwise, we're going to be having hearings into the future about whether someone has the financial ability to do what was required. And I'm for one not voting for that, okay? Because that goes way beyond what I signed up for. You know, and I don't want anyone to think I'm unsympathetic with these costs. I know they're stupendous. I mean, I've seen them. I've got a vacant lot across the street from where I live that was $16,000, $18,000 to restore. Mark knows where it is in Payne Acres, the old mailbox lot. Okay, and that didn't even count what was paid to the engineer and everyone else. So when the time all was said and done, that was like a $25,000 bill. That was painful. All right? I
I
inherited,
think,
it, but
I think Kyle is spot on, Mike. He
Yeah.
absolutely is. We're walking down a road that I don't think we should be walking down.
I agree. I'm not, listen, I agreed with you, Kyle. I mean, I think if we go into the enforcement in court and we're all agreeing with you, wow, isn't it amazing? But I think if the judge can then make a determination if they want to be more lenient, but I don't think it's our role to play. I really don't. We don't have that prerogative within our jurisdiction.
Bingo.
Agreed.
I think, and I don't want to cut anybody else off, I think what we need to keep in mind, and I agree with everything that's been said, but the deadline has not passed yet. So nobody's in violation of anything yet. I guess the only option that I see that the commission has, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, is if you were to bump back the deadline for completion one more time, and again, I'm not suggesting you do that, but maybe giving some opportunity before we go to district court, or I think it's actually
Superior Court.
Superior Court.
You know, on this, I mean, that's the only flexibility, and it's not terribly flexible. I'm not suggesting, oh yeah, we put this off for another 2 years. I mean, you might want to bump it back, you know, until the end of the growing season. I forget what the date is particularly. I know it was a date that was agreed upon by everybody, including the consultants and the project side. So, you know, that's just an option. I'm playing devil's advocate here that the commission might want to consider, which would require them amending the order of conditions. I mean, we're just not going to vote on a new date now. That you can't do that. That's not procedurally correct.
No, it isn't. But I see what you're saying. That's why I asked the question earlier about, you know, phasing and whether or not the, you know, restoration can be phased. And from my standpoint, you know, I'd like to see the DNRT work done sooner than later, since that's actually an encroachment on third parties' property. But I don't, you know, a year is a long time to ask for that extension. I mean, I'm inclined, to me, they both have to be done this year. Okay, now what those dates are, Mark, I don't know. I mean, I can
I mean,
understand.
the reality is, if you're gonna stick to having it completed this year, the longest you could go out was the work would have to be completed by, you know, a period between October 15th and November 10th. And I use that because typically October 15th was the, you know, 10, 15 years ago, that was the end of the growing season. But as we all know, our falls have been milder later. You know, we're getting to Thanksgiving and we're still, you know, 50s and 60s, which one, you know, could argue is still part of the growing season. The problem is that if you plant on November 28th and it snows on November 29th, you know, you got a
You
problem.
wasted your money. You wasted all the money
You spent a lot of money for no good reason, because you're gonna have to spend it again. So, you know, we can look into the commission could consider extending to the end of the growing season, and we'd figure out a date. You know, I think the date was the current date is the end of June or something, or September or something like that, but I'd have to look it up.
You know, I would say that I'd keep that date for the DNRT property, but I'd be certainly willing to consider the extension to the end of the growing season for the rest of it. That's not going to be quite the help that I know he's looking for, but on the other hand, you know, that's, to me, that's about as lenient as I feel like I can go without making inquiry into
But doing that, remember, he's got to file for an amendment to the order of conditions, because we're changing an order of conditions, which is going to cost immediate money up front. You know, filing fees, notifications, that whole deal. That's stuff that he
No, I
and
get it.
his team has to do. And apparently from what Clay suggested to me was he has spent all his money on his team and doesn't have money for the plants and the dirt and the this and the that, so.
Mr. Chair, I agree about maybe extending it, but my gut feeling is we're gonna have this conversation again. And we're just prolonging the agony here. And we're putting a burden on us that should not be put on us. We met our burden, and I don't want to appear to be a cold-hearted son of a bitch. I'm not. But we're going to be having this conversation again. And all we're doing is, Mark, you put it very well, we're kicking this can down the road. And we're in a dilemma here. We are human beings, if I can use that. But I know we're going to have this conversation again. It's happened in the past, and history is going to repeat itself.
Richard, we are human beings, but we are regulators too.
Yes, we're in agreement, Mark. We are in
It's
agreement.
an absolute paradox.
Yes, we're betwixt and between here. Absolutely.
My only thought is if we do extend it, I don't want to set the precedent or give people the impression that we're doing it solely for financial hardship considerations. Like, we do it for other reasons. I don't want people to think they have an out. Anytime they need more time, they can just say, I can't pay for it.
And that there are different shades of white, and I agree with what you're saying, but they're going to take our actions, or someone could, and interpret them in a way that suits them. We're in a dilemma here. We are in a dilemma. Oh, boy. I'd love him to prove me wrong that we don't have this conversation again. And I'm willing, I'm in Mike's camp here, the chairman's camp. I'm willing to give it a whack, but it's a bad investment. It is. I'm sorry. But I'll give it a whack.
Well, what I would suggest here, having heard the comments, and I haven't heard from Blizzard Joe on this, so I don't want to speak for them, but it seems to me that there is a level of discomfort in the context of the request, okay? Not necessarily, we haven't gotten down to the specifics yet. What I would suggest is that the client or the applicant has every right to request an amended order of conditions to change the date. I'm not going to tell him, I'm not going to tell you to tell him to do that. That's his charge. He's made a plea to us, or through me, and I think I got it pretty accurate. And if I didn't, I'm sorry, Clay, but I did the best I could do. Got a lot of stuff going on in my head. If he wants to request an amendment, and put together the arguments in an official capacity for the public record, then we can make a recommendation to you, and ultimately you can make a decision as to whether you want to accept the requested amendment or not. I mean, procedurally, that's the way it would have to be done anyway. So, I mean, we can't say, oh yeah, we're going to extend it by a year. We can't change an order of conditions that way. There has to be a filing for an amendment. So I would leave that to Clay's decision, whether he wants to incur those costs on top of complying with whatever he requests for an amendment.
And I don't want to beat up a dead horse here, but we still have that elephant in the room with the trailer still being on the property, and the risk we take in him restoring this, and then he's ordered to remove the trailer, and now we're right back at square one. And if he's already expended his money here, then he's not going to have money to restore it in the future.
Bingo.
For the third time. So you know, what, maybe we could get some kind of report on where that is at with the select board. I know that's not our jurisdiction, but, you know, it's kind of a,
Hi, I can tell you, a week ago, I asked the very question to Sean McGinnis, and he said there had been no application made to the select board.
Okay.
That's out of our hands. I mean, that was a
yeah,
FYI question for me. You know,
Right.
they have not done that. They have continued not to do that. It's in the order of conditions that they need to do that. And that has a lot of implications as to, you know, Clay's lot, but also to the DNRT lot. And, you know,
Can I just receive some brief clarification as to what specifically this situation involves with restoration in the trailer? Only because I'm coming into this a little green, I'd like to better understand it.
sure, I'll give you a quick summary. Mr. Guerra acquired a piece of a landlocked piece of land on Lake Nokichoke off Deerfield Road. Landlocked, yes, but there was, when the land was transferred over to DNRT, the front lot, there was a clause in the deed which read that anyone who owned the rear lot, which is Mr. Guerra's lot, had would have perpetual right of passage over the soon-to-be DNRT lot. No legal easement, no staked out cart path or anything, just a narrative description of access. Mr. Guerra came in and spoke to me prior to his purchase of the landlocked parcel. And I indicated that there were challenges. It's landlocked. I didn't know about the deed issue at that point. And I said, you're on the lake. There's wetlands in and around the area. I said, use and development is going to be problematic. Mr. Guerra purchased the property for the purposes of siting a trailer. And when I say a trailer, I mean, I don't know the dimensions, but it is a large RV, towable RV. It's non-mechanized. It's got to be, you know, 40 to 50 feet long, and it's a pretty permanent kind of structure. He's got it set out there in the buffer zone, and in getting the vehicle into that, he damaged wetlands on the DNRT property because the vehicle was just big and it had a big turning radius, and, you know, took out plants, gouged out wetland dirt and things of that nature. Once he got it on his property, he kind of did some work to enhance the outdoor living space, which involved impacting wetlands, cutting wetland vegetation and the like. It was reported to us by a person who is a trails person in the town of Dartmouth. He was hiking and he came upon this. We discovered it, followed up, and the amount of wetlands that is damaged is in excess of 6,000 square feet, but some of the damage is naturally recoverable, and we're allowing for that. Some of which is not, so there are planting plans for that. The fact that the trailer is out there, the trailer is regulated by the town of Dartmouth. It's in the zoning bylaw, but it's a determination that is made by the select board as to whether a trailer can stay on a site. I'm not well versed in what qualifies to stay or not. I just know it needs a permit, which it does not have. So the question of chapter 375 of the bylaws is involved, because if the trailer can't stay, the trailer's got to come out, and they're going to have to get it out carefully. They've got to restore, whether the trailer's there or not. The damage is done. But the question is, if they were to restore, then take the trailer out, are they going to damage what they restored and have to do it again? You know, paying upwards of double what the initial violation was. Question, why are we wasting our time on this if it can't be there in the first place, just get it out of there and fix the damage. So these are all the questions that are out there. We issued an order of conditions to fix the wetlands. That's what we did. And they need to be compliant with chapter 375, the mobile home recreational vehicle bylaw. They have yet to comply with that condition. I believe it's condition 21 of the order. And that's where we stand. Mr. Guerra has, and this has been going on for, just about a year. Mr. Guerra engaged qualified representation. Their restoration plan was a good one. I don't know what their contractual agreement was, but obviously it is, according to Mr. Guerra, has impacted him immensely. And the payment to do the design and get the permits to do the work now does not allow Mr. Guerra to do the work in the time allotted and required for by the permit. I think that's the summary.
Thank you.
He created his own problem here,
I agree, Richard.
Well,
and
I
he
think
knew about it
the issue
before he did anything.
even if, I don't even know if that's really an issue, because whether he created the problem or he just innocently found himself with the problem, what we're being asked to do now is consider someone's financial resources in determining whether we're going to make them comply with an order of conditions for the restoration of a violation. It has nothing to do with, in my view, whether or not it was intentional, it was accidental, and frankly, we have no provision in our bylaw, nor do we have any under the state regulations to take into account the finances of somebody. We don't have the ability to make that determination. Are we going to be requiring people now to supply their income tax returns and W-2s and 1099s so we can see how do you spend your money? We want to see whether or not maybe you have to cut out your vacation. I don't want to get into that.
Yeah, that would not be well received by the public.
No,
That's
I don't think we don't have the authority to ask for that, number
That's right.
one. So, that means we make a decision with no facts, and I'm not one to make a decision with no facts. Okay, so to me, it's simple. And it doesn't matter whether it was intentional, unintentional. Doesn't matter. Just doesn't. That's because I wouldn't give a benefit that I can't confer on somebody, even if I thought they were doing things innocently, nor would I punish somebody. Just do what we ask you to do, and I don't really care how we got there. So anyway, that's me talking, but commissioners, your points. I mean, I think Mark summed it up, okay? If you want to try, Mr. Guerra, to make an amendment to the order of conditions, you have that right. We may not agree. It'll cost you money to do that. But we can't just agree to postpone the restoration work because you tell us you can't afford it. We don't have that right to ask you to prove that, and we're not going to. We've never inquired of somebody's financial circumstances. It's not within our jurisdiction.
And I would also suggest that if, for whatever reason, Mr. Guerra fails to meet the deadlines, if he chooses not to amend the order, then we're moving to another phase of enforcement, which is Superior Court, potentially Superior Court.
And let them make the decision.
Well, it's going to be more than make the decision. Now you're also adding to the cost, because now the fines kick in. You have to have representation. It becomes, and you got to pay for the town's attorney. So by the time all's said and done, it makes the cost of the restoration double or triple.
But Mike, that's what we do for a living. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. But again, we're betwixt and between here, and
I'm just
Maybe
saying, I
he
just want to be clear. I just want to be clear about that. Everything is with a cost, right?
downstream consequences, absolutely.
Everything is with a cost. And- But that's my feeling on it. So, I mean, I've stated my point a few times now. I don't want to belabor it. We've all got opinions. Anyone else who wants to be heard on it?
I agree with Mike, Mark, Rich. You know, it seems like the suggestions are very reasonable, and we can't do a wallet biopsy to see whether someone is able to pay these fees or not. And it's especially applicable because apparently this gentleman knew about the expenses before embarking on this purchase of the land. So I think we ought to give him a chance to do the reparations that were, you know, agreed upon or recommended. If that doesn't work, he can reapply, or we can go to Superior Court.
Anyone else? Okay, I think
I
we've
don't-
already,
Mike, I don't know, is that Linda Vanderveer from DNRT has something to say? I see her on, she's muted.
yeah, I didn't see any raise your hand, but if you want to say something, that's fine.
She's part and parcel to this. She does have
Well,
it.
she is, but I mean, you know, I think we've
Oh, I
already
know.
expressed our
I'm just-
sentiment. We're not gonna just agree to extend this out, so.
Linda, did you have anything to add?
You know, we certainly would love for RT's land to be restored this year. I mean, just like you, I really like to get things off my list. I don't want to have to chase this for another year. But obviously we would, you know, be happy with whatever the commission dictates. But we would prefer, obviously, to have DNRT's land restored this year.
Well, I can tell you this much, the existing order of conditions is right now the law of the land, and that's what it's supposed to happen, okay? And our issue here is whether or not we would give a new date for the restoration of Mr. Guerrera's land, and because of financial difficulties. And as I think we've stated, that's beyond our purview, and it's not a condition that we look at in determining when you can do things, okay? So the only way that the dates on that order of conditions get changed is if there's a request made for an amendment to the order of conditions, of which you'll be notified. And even then, there's no guarantee that the commission would agree to extend it. So, you know, right now, what was put in the order of conditions is the law of the land. And if it doesn't get done, then we go the next step. We don't want to, but if we go the next step, and then the stakes get even greater, right? Because now we've got town council involved, litigation in Superior Court, and assuming we prevail, which we've yet to not prevail, that means that the town's legal fees, the legal fees of the defendant, and the penalties and fines which are imposed are all on top of the restoration work. And that could easily be a multiple of the restoration work. So, I mean, but that's the only option. We're not going to start taking financial inquiries of applicants in making our decisions. We just can't. That's way beyond our purview. So you could rest assured, we're not changing the date, and your land is supposed to be remedied, restored this year. I don't have the date. That's what it's supposed to happen.
I think it would be preferable to us also if it was done earlier in the season versus chancing it towards the end of the growing season. I mean, obviously, you
We
know,
haven't
if it's
changed
done
anything.
properly in the fall, it can work, but
Yeah, we haven't changed anything, and we're, you know, right now, what we're looking at is what you've seen before. And there's no change. So that's the law of the land.
thank you.
Could it change? Maybe, but you'll get notice of it, and you'll certainly have every opportunity to say, you know, you're not that happy with it as it relates to your land, and I think that's fair. So I'll be honest with you. If there's a phasing, it's going to have to make sense to me, for me to vote in favor of an amendment. I don't have enough information right now to say that I would, but I certainly wouldn't change the date for working on your land. That's me only speaking. I'm not speaking on behalf of the commission. But right now, we don't have that request in front of us, but we have a request, it's an informal request to allow informally an extension because of financial conditions. Well, we can't do any of those things. We can't modify an order of conditions informally. And we can't take information regarding finances, so. Anyone else?
Do you need a vote of any kind, or is this just a forum for us to share our opinions on the matter?
Yeah, just for discussion. We're giving advice as to what to do, but at this point, anyone else have anything else to add to, or anything new for the commission to discuss? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
So moved.
Second.
Second,
Second motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Kyle.
yes.
Richard.
Yes.
Thank you. Liz.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes,
And I'm a yes as well.
I'd also like to welcome Liz. I have not had the pleasure of meeting her yet.
Thank
I-
you, Jim.
I think you'll like working with her. I'm looking forward to it, Liz.
I plan to attend the interview, but I was in Florida and my phone broke down. And
Oh.
I wasn't near another resource. I was an hour away from the apartment where the computer was. So, welcome anyway.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Liz, did you have fun?
I learned a lot.
Wait till next week.
Well, there's nothing next week, Richard. You mean 2 weeks from now?
You know what I mean, Mike.
I know. I just don't want her to come online next week and think that y'all abandoned her. So, meeting is adjourned.